I recently criticized Jeremy Ethier's study, and what I don't know is how is he going to respond? I've never heard of the guy, even though he's got 7 million something subscribers. But from what I've seen, he seems reasonable and genuine. I mean, he was honest about his financial sources in his paper. That was fairly obvious from his YouTube. Clearly there's a sort of advertisement there for the machines that he was using, but he also took the time to say, well, you could just do these other exercises as well. You know, he seems as sensible and impartial as you could expect anyone to be in this sports science arena. Now, a legitimate question you might have is, why would I think that there's any chance of Jeremy Ethier actually responding to my criticism when I've got like less than 1,000 subscribers and he's got over 7 million? Well, here's the thing about good researchers, is that they end up being more accessible than bad researchers. I did a study, just a little pilot study, where I showed that sports science students were worse than random when you ask them questions, specific questions about BMI and the health consequences of BMI. So I just wrote this crappy little thing, and then next thing I knew, the top researcher, Catherine Flegel, was reading my research, and I'm like, that's weird. Like, no one else did. Only the top person, because if someone got to the top legitimately by actually the merit of their research, they're out there turning every stone and reading all the research. Mike Israetel's not doing that, trust me. I had Lyle McDonald turn up in the comments, like, people who are legitimately interested in understanding the truth, they're out there and they'll turn up. And the only example I can think of that in sports science, you've got James Steele and James Fisher at Northampton University. They're doing some good stuff. And I've written stuff and seen them reading my stuff. I have no profile in academia, but they just apparently want to understand things. So if you make a legitimate criticism, they'll hopefully listen. And I have an example of that with House of Hypertrophy. He's a YouTuber. As far as I know, he has no credentials in sports science, but he knows the literature and he knows it much better than someone like Mike Israetel. And he reached out to James Steele to say, hey, you've done something wrong here. James Steele replied and actually said, oh yeah, you're right. I'm going to redo my meta-analysis.
And one of the researchers I contacted, James Steele, has decided to redo this analysis using some highly interesting methods. So we can look forward to a new meta-analysis on protein intake, and I'm excited to cover it when it's out.
And that is how a legit scientist reacts to criticism, if it's warranted and constructive criticism. James Steele is a legit scientist. If Jeremy Ethier is of the same character and if he responds in the same way, this could be a real pivoting point in sports science and in the sort of YouTube scene, where if he's actually putting his money where his mouth is and doing, well, at least potentially doing good studies. I mean, this one sucked, let's be honest. But what I'm trying to say is this could be a positive thing, and there's at least signs that he is a legitimate, genuine actor here. I would think that his bias in doing a study on lengthened exercises is that he wanted to show that lengthened exercises are better, especially when you've got these machines in his YouTube that someone has some financial reason to want to advertise these machines, trust me, and they're probably the same person who funded the study. I'm not accusing him of being deceptive about that because he's revealed his sources. But the point is, if he's publishing data that goes against what I presume is his bias, that shows that he's at least committed enough to the data and to the process to report his results accurately. The problem is that none of these lengthened exercises were any good. They weren't really even lengthened, so you're never going to get the benefit of that. See, you got a problem when you're trying to design conventional commercial exercise machines around lengthened or stretched exercises. The person needs to be able to get into and out of the equipment easily, but the range of motion that you have using your own muscles isn't as much as a passive stretch. So if I try to lift my knee up, I can only get it so far using my psoas muscle to pull it up. If I then grab my knee and pull it towards my chest, I can get my knee towards my chest. See, I almost fell over doing the demonstration. You can see the problem here. But how are you going to design a piece of equipment where it's easy for the person to get into it? Well, you just can't do it. See, the glute machine they used, you have to put your leg over top of this arm thing. If you were really going to make a stretched machine, you would have to pull your leg over the thing. And of course, you'd have to have a backrest to create the reaction force so that you can actually push forward without pushing yourself backwards. Here we've got a woman standing on one leg in this incredibly unstable position. It's impossible for her to actually do a stretched glute exercise on this machine. And look, when I started doing lengthened exercises on my glutes, I had to buy new shorts. So no one is going to tell me that the glutes don't work for lengthened exercises. No, your exercises don't work because they're not lengthened properly, because you haven't thought this through. One of the muscles that Jeremy Ethier mentions as being good for lengthened partials is the calves. Now think about it. If I had to tense my tibialis anterior to lift up my foot in order to get into a machine, I could only go so far. But because the way we do calf exercises usually requires, standing on that foot, you can get a better stretch by default. So they've designed a good stretched exercise incidentally by accident. Whereas with these other muscles, they really haven't thought it through, and they haven't been ballsy enough just to do something different, right? They haven't designed the exercise around lengthening the muscle. So like I said, I don't know anything about Jeremy Ethier. I've seen that Mike Israetel appears in some of his YouTubes. That's a red flag. But if anyone here knows Jeremy Ethier than I do, and we want to weigh in and think, how is this going to turn out? I'm interested to hear it.